The VW Bulli has been around for 75 years. It's high time for a version that encompasses all possible functions with just a single body design.
I love to wake up in the morning, but keep dreaming without wording. The day is gone. And sometimes I take a walk, but I forget about the clock. I can slow down. My friends are sitting laughing, but I just keep on laughing.
And with that, hey, and welcome to this new video here at joenohs, and welcome to the first impression of the VW e-Transporter and e-Caravelle here from Athens. We start directly with the Caravelle, probably the most practical and suitable vehicle for everyday and private customers compared to all the other body styles available. There's a flatbed, there's a Pan America, there's the classic van, the box van, a combination variant. So you already notice it's not just, but this one is probably the most comparable to the VW ID.Bus, especially with the long wheelbase, even though the long wheelbase here is more like the short wheelbase. The primary goal here is to optimize and make the most effective use of each and every available inch of the available space provided. And with a length of 5.45 meters or 5.05 meters in the short wheelbase, this one has a lot to offer. The technical details up front: 64 kilowatt hours usable from an 83 kilowatt hour battery, 320 kilometers per WLTP, 210 kilowatts power, and that power point notably reminds of the ID bus. In the Pro version, with a long wheelbase, it has 210 kilowatts from rear motors, totaling 286 horsepower. And why you'll notice during the driving impression why 50 euros can make a huge difference when ordering, and why some testers on YouTube will deliver strange reviews. You'll hear about it later. Now let's first look at it from the outside. First of all, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, this design no longer quite resembles the Bulli that I showed you at the beginning of the video. But it's also logical, because this vehicle is the first time Volkswagen has not completely developed a transporter on its own. Collaborating with Ford, the new Transporter is currently designed and built on the very same platform as the Ford Transit. I've driven that one before, but I didn't make a video of it. It was just during another event. And now we can basically see what Volkswagen has made out of the Transit. It sounds a bit silly, but with joint collaborations and developments like these, it's always a blend of different elements. You can see it with the Cabri and the Explorer, and now you see it here as well, where they swap the commercial vehicle platform with the regular passenger car platform a bit, and both benefit from it. If you want a booty, you definitely have to go for the ID bus. However, there are several advantages why you might consciously choose the Caravelle instead, and they are here at the front. Much more like the predecessor with this continuous chrome strip which houses the VW logo, and also, for example, the charging port directly at the front. I really think the front in this design is cool. We have the trend trim line here, which is the highest below the edition that's still available at the beginning. But feel free to write in the comments what you think about the overall design of the car. If you were just as puzzled as we were during the recordings about what this is, no one could really tell us. I suspect that these bumps are probably intended for installing crossbars or other similar structural elements. For instance, for police, patrol vehicles, or groups like the ADAC. Why they decided to have it always standing up there looking quite ugly, I find quite unfortunate. Especially with the Caravelle, which represents the top equipment and shouldn't only be optimized just for the business customer. The most important point in favor of the larger version is the trunk space. Just before that, very briefly, here we now feature the higher-end lamp design, which includes a colored insert. The base has a more classic headlight, pure faux up front, and, for instance, he almost preferred it. It doesn't open electrically here, offering plenty of ample space, allowing me to stand comfortably in the shade and rest my eyes. But of course, also to invite well. The loading height is remarkably low, which naturally speaks for the Transporter. And you have an incredible amount of storage space here. In the Caravelle, behind the third row of seats, there is still 1,000 liters of trunk volume. And that's, of course, an advantage of the long wheelbase. Otherwise, you have 40 centimeters less, then everything shrinks a bit, and accordingly, significantly less space back here. We'll take a look at the seating rows and the interior in a moment, but first, let's check out the trunk design. There's also the vehicle available as a Transporter, meaning the same seating rows, but without the nice interior trim. This option is much more practical for everyday use. Share your thoughts in the comments. I just find it somewhat disappointing that here, for example, like, am I allowed? The charging cable is just flying around in a bag. I would always take the NRGkick with me, especially with construction vehicles. It makes it easier to have all its adapters with you. That's always my recommendation. If you're looking for a mobile charging solution, you can check below the video and save 5%. That can be worthwhile. I always have the 10-meter cable variant. With that, you can charge PV, you can charge your company car, and then separately settle the electricity costs at home. So you don't have to cover the cost of charging your company car with your home electricity bill. You can also use it for AC charging on the go. And it really shines for transporters and commercial customers because you can quickly plug into a CE16 or even a 32 socket somewhere. At the harbor, for instance, there's a charging option available, making you significantly more flexible. In the Caravelle, it just flies around somewhere. I could slide it a bit underneath there. And then, of course, there's the e-Transporter, the classic transporter shape. So, plenty of storage space and just up to 3 seats available. And we'll take a brief look at that right here. It looks quite similar outside. It's available in various trim lines. But you can also see the more budget-friendly headlights here. Personally, I think they actually don't look bad at all. You can spot the missing windows in the side profile, but there's also a mixed form. You've got a slice in the middle and a closed area at the very back. So 2 rows of seats and then the storage space. And there really is quite a bit of room. You can choose between a 2.60 meter loading length or a complete 3 meters in total, depending on whether you go for the short or long wheelbase option. The technical specifications don't differ at all in this case, so neither for the e-Caravan nor for the e-Transporter. You get these 64 kilowatt hours of usable battery capacity with both, but we'll talk later about why that is actually so low. And you have a decent width. The vehicle is over 2 meters wide. You can easily fit a Euro pallet in the back, still have 7 centimeters of space on both sides, and enjoy some cool features. A tow hitch with up to 2.3 tons towing capacity, and for example, 2 full sockets, an LED lighting that can be additionally turned on with a small light switch. The interior within the loading area is quite flexible. However, it also practically cries out to be fully outfitted, and there will probably again be shelving systems like Sortimo and similar ones that will provide you with perfect concepts. For me, that's all so far away anyway. I'm neither a craftsman nor do I have daily... I find it very exciting to show you the product category here, especially in relation to the vehicles. Since we did that with the ID.Bus Cargo before, I drove it around for 2 whole weeks. We remodeled our kitchen. I really came to appreciate having this car around. It was a fortunate coincidence to have it as a test car then. Plus, this model offers more space and additional features. For example, the roof rack that you can easily unfold directly and more. As I said, I don't think I'm the perfect channel to show this to you. Here's a brief and quick look into the e-Transporter. I still owe you the prices, and now at last, here they are available for you to check out. Prices start at 55,000 euros for the all-electric box van and 66,000 euros for the Caravan. The wagon, which is a simpler Caravelle model, is available at a slightly reduced price. You get the idea, right? If you're aiming for this style, the price starts at around 74,000 euros. 1,000 euros extra for the long wheelbase, applies to all variants, by the way, and in 2,000 euro increments for the different engines. That means 100 kilowatts is available for 75,000 euros. If you want 160 kilowatts, it's 77,000 euros. And for 79,000 euros, there's the Caravelle as a style with the big 210 kilowatt motor. That's how it is. Plus, there are many options available. Fully equipped as we drove today, it amounts to just under 90,000 euros. We'll arrive at the conclusion, discussing it in a comparative manner. In the end, we'll also revisit why I find it particularly challenging in such comparisons, especially the bars. But now to the interior, where there are indeed a few things to talk about when you have 3 rows of seats and various different versions. The electric variant will always have a maximum of 8 seats. That means 2 seats in the front, unless you have the Transporter, which we just checked out. It comes with 3 seats and a clever storage solution. Although I have the ability to move this seat backward to theoretically fit something inside, it's really not designed for that particular purpose. With the van, however, you can. You can lift the right 2 seats up, for example, to cleverly store the charging cable or even the NRGkick. He could probably easily fit in there even with a bag, with old adapters and so on. And that's really practical. Then you have the entire loading area for everything you want to transport, and at the front only for the person you're taking with you and the necessary accessories. I really like the interior otherwise, but there are also a few distinctions. For example, here in the Caravelle variant, there's now a roll-up cover with 2 cup holders underneath. Down here is a relatively large storage compartment with an inductive charging area, and then these captain's chair armrests, which are actually quite nice, available on both sides. You can also put it down on the left here, and I can sit like this during the drive. The entire layout is relatively high and somewhat reminiscent of the combustion engine multivan variants, which still exist today, but much more towards Ford. So you have to say inside here, it's all very comparable. We will get to the software in a moment, but before that, the steering wheel is from Volkswagen. It's the same here as in the Transporter. It functions quite well. And the round instruments in front of me are very reminiscent of Volkswagen, I think. Here's a handbrake, buttons above it, then the display, and the start-stop button, which isn't really needed since the car starts itself. On and off, just getting in on the right, with the gear stick on the left and the controls for the windows conveniently placed there, and that's about it. There's a multitude of storage compartments, one compartment up here, one down here, another drawer way up top. It's definitively designed with practicality in mind, and the sunglasses easily fit up here too. Plus, there's the Harman Kardon sound system installed in here. It's decent. Some songs sounded great, while others, particularly more acoustic ones, didn't sound as good, but if it's bass heavy, then it's pretty all right. And now I'll just head to the back. Unlike the ID bus, there is no sliding window here, but rather just a pop-out window that you can pull outward. There is a shade you can attach up here if needed. I'll lower it now to let in more light and make the interior a bit brighter overall. Volkswagen and Ford have opted not to include a large glass panoramic roof in this particular model, and the second row of seats can't slide either, but they can be removed. Each of the 3 individual seats weighs 28 kilos, and you can install or remove them individually. I find it handy as you could remove the middle seat, for example, to make it easier to get to the back. Additionally, you can fold everything completely, all the rows of seats here in the back, so you can place things on top without always needing to remove the seat rows. Honestly, there's a lot of space to enjoy. There's also some handy door storage, like for fitting a bottle. I've got USB-C ports down there. By the way, there's also an outlet by the driver's seat, and in the van, as shown, there are 2 more outlets in the back. They are available optionally in the Caravelle if you don't want the 2-ton climate control here. You need to be aware that with the 3-zone climate control, if they install a second compressor in the back where the outlets are, there is only a single 230-volt outlet available there. But in terms of space, you always notice here really on all seats because they are identical. So whether it's a middle seat or outside, there's really good space. And optionally, there are up to 6 ISOFIX points here. They naturally distribute themselves across the 3 seats available here in the 3rd seating row. This is a continuous bench and you can't move it around or anything. It's fixed in here, but it offers similar comfort as in the front. The seats are just as wide. I simply have a bit less space to the side because of the setup situation here. Up here, there's a convenient cup holder available, and down below in the door, there are 2 handy USB-C ports, just like that, if you prefer having them. The space up front is good, but the second row seats are positioned lower, making it a bit less comfy to tuck your feet. However, it's still quite manageable overall. And here you just have much, much more space than in all the other 7 or 8-seaters on the market, whether it's SUVs like our Kia EV9 or the Volvo XC30, or even an ID, Buzz. Here you just have by far more space and yet still have the displayed trunk. And just as easily as you can mount and unmount the seats, you can get in and out of the car because this entry angle here is really reasonable. I assume we will still talk about the software, which is for the Explorer and in this Transporter, it's basically Ford software with VW overlay, similar to how Cabri uses VW software with a different theme. This appears like this. There's a widget available and there are various different options you can explore here. Settings for vehicles or general settings. This indeed gives off an even stronger Volkswagen-like vibe overall. However, if you're used to the current system from the ID.7, ID.4, or even the ID bus, then this is quite challenging. Getting used to it. There are indicators you wouldn't normally see in a VW, like for instance, what has consumed how much energy from the actual energy used. Everything else, however, is somewhat unusual. And that ultimately starts off with the navigation system as well. For instance, if I plan a route from Athens to Augsburg, it doesn't resemble at all what you typically expect from the current Volkswagen electric vehicles and what the ID bus is now also managing very efficiently. You'll notice down here, an active route planning is currently being loaded and it might take a little longer than expected. Then there are various options. The charging stops are reasonably integrated. All the VW settings we know, like the percentage you want to arrive with and what you want at the final destination or when at the charging station. I truly miss all those features here. Their absence makes the transition and the distinction very clear. And 33 hours and 55 minutes from Athens to Augsburg charging, so just charging time, is also quite interesting. But you see all the stops here? It was all there and works too. The course is just a bit unfair. Otherwise, there's wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto standard here. This also works reliably and quickly. What I find cool and have never seen before is that you can optionally display these widgets on the right, but you don't have to. They typically don't rush because you can also expand Apple CarPlay easily. And I find that very, very exciting because I didn't know it like that before. Usually it's either CarPlay is big or it's adjusted somewhere in the menu. Climate menu also comes with an extra heating function for the interior. This has nothing to do with the battery heating, as there's no manual option for that, and you can control the whole thing for both the front and the back. It's all quite intuitive, but if you are familiar with VW vehicles, I find it a bit lacking. But enough about the software, let's get on and talk about driving. Just like with the ID bus, the seating position in the new electric Transporter is, of course, no longer like it used to be in the Bulli. Right up front, almost near the windshield. There are simply a few issues nowadays regarding crash safety, which is why you can't do something like this anymore. Having that comparison is still more than exciting indeed. Yes, you're sitting at a higher position in the van and in a different manner compared to all the other car models we typically show you, but nowhere near as much as in the Bulli. However, I like the seating position. I like that the window edges are relatively low, which makes me feel like I'm sitting slightly higher. And even so, when you drive past more regular cars, you really notice how high the vehicle stands. But I never get the feeling that I'm not sure where exactly the front of the car ends. I tend to look more towards the back. That's what the digital rearview mirror is for, which you can optionally toggle on up here. It's optional and isn't visually included. Therefore, you have to rely on the mirrors and other means to properly assess and understand the car better. It's intriguing that there's an available equipment option featured in this vehicle. It costs 54 euros, and I think it's an optional feature that's available with the equipment choices, and ensures that you're able to make the vehicle accelerate in a less effective manner. Unlike other electric vehicles where you pay extra 1,000 or 1,500 euros for an acceleration boost, here you actually pay for having less acceleration. Why is that? It's quite simple, because Volkswagen says the car is for the masses, many want to get around with it. And then it's weird when you have, for example, a passenger transport company and you're driving alone in the car and it accelerates brutally due to the electric start. With a fully loaded car, it won't accelerate as quickly. Then you face a range of demands. To accommodate this, Volkswagen provides an option that successfully supports or enables driving with a noticeably reduced level of acceleration. Now, in the version we're driving right now, I can floor it and it really pushes me back into the seat. So there's really some power behind it. These 286 horsepower aren't just on paper. I think 7.9 seconds from 0 to 100 is a decent value, and you can drive well like that. If you haven't chosen this option, because it's not like you just tick a box in a menu. No, if you do that when ordering, then your vehicle will always accelerate more slowly. With a ton of load capacity, you can maintain the same driving feel consistently. The performance is then empty in the vehicle, producing output at around 40%. However, this is, as I previously mentioned, dependent on how much weight is in the car. The vehicle otherwise drives really reasonably, both the van we drove and the Caravan here. That's due to the fact that both vehicles handle well on the road. By the way, the van included the option with reduced acceleration capability. It was genuinely exciting to be able to feel this difference here once again. Yeah, it essentially drives quite like a standard car. I hardly notice much of a difference at all except when it comes to the dimensions of height, length, and width. But that does sound quite good that the suspension doesn't give in too much, ensuring that even on particularly bad roads, it doesn't just bounce around haphazardly. Would be interesting to see, of course, how it looks here, fully loaded or in the van with a good load in the back, because that challenges the chassis in a completely different way. And of course, parking is part of it too. We were just standing here at the Acropolis in a parking lot and briefly looking at the camera. You have to activate them again when driving forward if you have the 360-degree camera here. Then you receive a lovely view here, which I find quite appealing, especially in combination. With these smaller side mirrors, especially the lower ones for the blind spot, you manage well. So I can also quickly switch to reverse here, and then you can directly see the display for trailer operation. And I was pleasantly surprised to realize just how agile the car truly is, considering its length. Less surprisingly, you notice the length at every turn, whether it's making a quick turn in the city and remembering that you have to be careful because of the long wheelbase, to make sure you avoid scraping the curb behind or in any sort of parking situations you might find yourself in. It's not that straightforward, and then there's the width as well. But let's not forget, it is indeed a van we're discussing here. It's not like a slightly bigger Golf or a Charon or something. No, what we have here is actually under the Crafter, the largest model at Volkswagen. And you tend to quickly forget about that because the steering wheel feels just like one from a regular Volkswagen passenger car. And also, many other attributes suggest it might be a VW car. But then suddenly you're in a commercial vehicle, which also, here in the Caravelle, it stands out more than in the Transporter because the interior clearly communicated that it was a Transporter. There's a key point that should not be overlooked. This model is the first from Volkswagen to include the groundbreaking one-pedal driving technology. In the lower section of the instrument cluster, it shows me a small pedal and a 1, indicating that one-pedal mode is active. I can activate it over here through the modes, a bit hidden all the way at the bottom, to turn one pedal on or off, and that's it. And then comes the car. To a complete standstill, yes, that is naturally because of its Ford origin. But I find it cool that this exists here, and maybe one day the commercial vehicle colleagues will talk to those from traditional cars. Because then you might eventually see it as an option in IT models. And of course, even if it's just a brief experience, a first impression of the highway can't be missed. In Greece, on routes we're driving, the speed limit is just 110 kilometers per hour. But that's enough to get a feel for what the wind noises do. Because up here near the top of the door, there's quite a bit going on, although up to about 100 kilometers per hour, I found the noise level in here really good. Both the rolling noise and the wind were reasonable. And then there's a moment just after 100 kilometers per hour where it starts to get quite loud. Now, I can't quite determine if it might also have to do with the wind and weather conditions, but actually, it's almost identical here most of the time. Furthermore, a comprehensive range of assistance systems is available. That means on one hand, I have the active lane keeping assistant with the adaptive cruise control. I can set them nicely, and then the vehicle does it by itself. And let's check it out. Now it's almost 120, but nope, it doesn't seem to take it. I still haven't managed to find out if it can actually adapt to the speed, if that's what you want, mainly because there's no dedicated button for it. By the way, the limit is 150 kilometers per hour, and the sign recognition here in Greece is not the best, as it shows 130, even though there was a sign on the right with 120. In Germany, the sign recognition by Volkswagen works very reliably and exceptionally well. Whether it's due to Ford or Greece, let's set that aside. Here, in this particular context, it truly makes perfect and complete sense. When we discuss fuel consumption later on, make sure to remember that it includes approximately 20 to 30 kilometers on the highway, even though the speed limit here is just 120 kilometers per hour. And another key point, the steering wheel or hand detection. Unfortunately, for this model, it requires turning, unlike other ID models where you can just rest your hand. No, you actually have to give a steering impulse. But that's okay and, I think, almost forgivable in a commercial vehicle. With all the assistance systems, that's fine. On top speed, the ID. Bus is capped at 145, at least the smaller models. Once you have the appropriate motor like this one, with 210 kilowatt rear-wheel drive, then it goes up to 160. I find it to be a very good speed because there's still a bit of leeway, but similar to here with the Leak Impulse, that's quite all right. After spending 2 whole days with the e-Caravan and the e-Van, I might not be a van expert nor ready to become a handyman, but I can definitely summarize quite a few things for you. Before that, the charging performance and consumption need mentioning. Yesterday's test drive used about 20 kilowatt hours. Today, over nearly 100 kilometers, it was 25. Today, we also had the version that essentially showcased its full performance potential. Yesterday, the controlled one, and I believe that makes a noticeable difference. VW specifies the maximum ranges under the WLTP standard with a limiter set to 90 kilometers per hour, so this should be viewed with some caution. All electric van versions are charged from 10 to 80% in 40 minutes due to the low peak charging rate of 125 kilowatts. Just for comparison, an ID bus with a large battery has 200 kilowatts and charges from 10 to 80% in under 30 minutes. At the AC station, it's more impressive. With 11 kilowatt charging, it goes from 0 to 100% in just 5.5 hours. Though for commercial use, 22 kilowatt might be preferred. How exactly should I go about comparing this to an ID bus? It's indeed quite challenging. Sure, there's the use case where you have shuttle services, or if you have a big family and you say, hey, an ID bus is just too small for us. But technically, the ID Buzz is better for everyone else because, and I've already mentioned the 64 kilowatt hour battery size, we have 83 kilowatt hours gross battery capacity. It's not the biggest. A VW ID. 7, for instance, has a biggest battery at 86 kilowatt hours net. The battery here is just 83 capacity-wise, and you're only able to use 64 of it. Why is the delta so significant? That's because Volkswagen claims they've already complied with a new regulation in this regard, which aims to have an impact on the burning behavior of batteries in the coming times and to sustain a smoldering fire over an extended duration. And apparently there needs to be a much larger difference between the gross and net values. I don't know the details. It's my first time hearing this at Volkswagen, but I want to share it transparently as their reasoning. You also mentioned that it is likely that batteries will continue to get bigger in the future, but the difference between net and gross will remain large. I'm curious to see where the development will go, especially since it was named this way for the first time here. I doubt the decision was Volkswagen's, it was Ford's. Looking at Ford, they have big batteries. They have the F-150 Lightning and the Mustang Mach-E, for example. And yet they put such a small battery in here. It doesn't do the vehicle justice. If the battery were larger, it would be overall significantly better positioned in general. An ID. Bus will soon arrive, providing more power, greater range, and already features an all-wheel drive that will be here next year. And those are all points I find a bit difficult. If you now say, okay, you're only in urban areas, maybe you have a car service and the size of cars is important to you, then it definitely makes sense, especially when used as a transporter and as a flatbed truck option. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share in the comments how you like this Ford and Volkswagen mix and your opinion on the car. Write it down below. And otherwise, you'll see my review of the ID. Bus up here. Cargo and down here is my long-distance test with the ID. Bus GTX.